Let us start with a basic fact. There are currently more laws mandating public disclosure of politically related spending than at any time in our nation's history. None of these disclosure laws have been altered in any way by the Supreme Court in Citizens United, in McCutcheon, or in any other decision. Candidates, political parties, PACs, super PACs already disclose all of their donors and expenditures beyond the most de minimis amounts. Federal law also requires reporting of all independent expenditures over $250 and of all, quote, electioneering communications of over $10,000, including the names of donors who contribute for those purposes. This information is all publicly available on the FEC website. 527 organizations that are not state or FEC registered PACs also report all donors to the Internal Revenue Service, which makes that information available to the public. Additionally, the FCC requires broadcast ads to include the identity of a spender to be made public within the ad itself, and requires further information to be made available through the political file each station is compelled to maintain. Given this extensive disclosure regime, it is simply a misnomer to talk of dark money or non-disclosing groups. Rather, what we have is a system in which some politically related spending occurs with less information than some people would like about the spender's members, donors, and internal operations. Assuming that this is a problem, the question is, how big a problem is it? The FEC reports that $7.3 billion was spent on federal races in 2012. Approximately $311 million of that was spent by organizations that did not itemize and disclose all of their donors. That is a bit under 4.5% of total spending came from groups that did not itemize their donors. Even this number tends to overstate the issue because many of these groups are well known to the public, groups such as the League of Conservation Voters and the United States Chamber of Commerce. But some still ask, why not seek still more information? Why not dig further into the disclosure well? Well, there are several reasons. First, studies show that compulsory disclosure disproportionately limits smaller grassroots organizations, particularly organizations that rely on volunteers. Second, and this is simply because of the regulatory compliance issues. Second, transfer provisions of the DISCLOSE Act would create a fundraising nightmare for nonprofits, even those that do no political work at all, hindering general nonprofit social welfare activity in society at large. Third, the DISCLOSE Act creates a great deal of junk disclosure. Much of the disclosure required by the Act would actually confuse the public. It would be unfair to persons who would have their names attached to speech they did not intend to or did not actually fund, and it would be misleading as to the amounts actually spent on political activity by requiring double, triple, and even more frequent counting of the same money. Finally, we cannot overlook the cost and privacy that come with excessive compulsory disclosure, costs which have led the Supreme Court to repeatedly strike down excessive disclosure laws, including in the 1970s, 1990s, and 2000s. Disclose, if passed, will certainly be challenged on constitutional grounds. But even if it were to withstand those challenges, this body should recognize and show consideration for the privacy and other interests that would justify such a challenge. The purpose of disclosure is to allow citizens to monitor their government. It is not to allow the government to monitor the political activity of its citizens. As the ACLU has put it, absent anonymity, some donors on both the left and right will simply not donate out of the legitimate fear that they will be harassed or retaliated against for their advocacy. We cannot have a serious hearing here today without recognizing the cost that compulsory disclosure has for unpopular speakers and new, often unpopular ideas that may in later years become quite popular, as was the case with abolition or more recently same-sex marriage. The CEO of a consumer business in West Virginia or Kentucky who believes that coal should be more heavily regulated, the small-town Alabama businessman who wants to fund a suit by the ACLU challenging prayer in the area's public schools, a Montana businesswoman who favors gun control. These people should not be compelled by the government to put forward information that will lead others to boycott them and destroy their businesses. Rightly or wrongly, and regardless of what some members of this panel may want to hear, millions of Americans already believe that their government is inappropriately spying on them. Tens of millions of Americans do believe, and I think there's enough evidence that this is hardly irrational, even if some think it is incorrect, that the IRS is being used as a tool to harass points of view that are critical of the current executive. There are millions of Americans who hear a senator publicly call for criminal prosecutions of political activity, and they see themselves as the intended target of that senator's wrath. Too often today, disclosure is not used to evaluate messages. Rather, people admit that they openly hate the message and seek to use disclosure to stop the speech altogether. As one organizer stated a while back, years ago, we would never have been able to get a blacklist together so fast and quickly. Thanks to compulsory disclosure in computers, it's much easier to blacklist fellow Americans than in the past, but many Americans will not see this as progress. Frankly, the approval of this bill is unlikely to improve trust in government precisely because many people do not trust the government now. If you wish to increase that trust and create a climate in which serious improvements, bipartisan improvements in disclosure laws can be considered, then you must at least appear to take seriously the fact that the Inspector General for Treasury has found that the IRS targeted speakers on the basis of their political activity, that the key IRS employee involved has pleaded the Fifth Amendment and suddenly lost a large cache of emails in what, as polls show, a substantial majority of Americans believe are highly suspicious circumstances. We must stop proposing to amend the Constitution for what appears to millions of Americans to be nothing more than short-term partisan gain. And we must no longer tolerate the disgraceful ongoing vilification on the floor of the United States Senate of individual citizens because of their lawful political activity. In other words, if we wish to improve trust in government and create a climate favorable to meaning and serious revision of disclosure laws, we must first act within this body to create a climate of trust. This bill is not helpful. Thank you.